Okay, and I just need to, okay, I'm good. So the purpose of my time here today is to talk about how do we develop a diversity strategy, and it's intent to be the 101 level and give you a high-level view and hopefully get you curious to find out more and from what I understood from Sarah, some of you have already started on this journey and looking for some tips and so forth, and some of you may not have started and also looking for some thoughts and ideas. So I think this will meet your need. Sarah, can you put it to the agenda, please? And the first bullet. So I'm going to start off with why your organization should develop a strategy. I've been working in this field for about over 20 years for sure, and it's 2017, and I know we're not there yet, and we need all of us to contribute to creating environments of diversity and inclusion. There's a lot of stats, been in the news recently around women and where they're ranking in terms of pay on the senior leadership level, as well as we're still not seeing the levels of visible minorities in the workplace, et cetera. So there's lots of data showing that this is work that we still need to be done. I'm going to walk you through what it takes to develop a well-researched and systematic approach for developing a strategy for your company, and lastly, any pitfalls that may occur. Before I get too far, it's really important that we get the definition straight. And I love to use the work of Andre Tapia, wrote a great book called The Inclusion Paradox, the Obama Era and the Transformation of Global Diversity. And he said that diversity is the mix. It's all the ways we differ. And we know that that includes everything from gender, race, ethnicity, inclusive of work background, personality, etc. And the inclusion, which is this idea of people feeling a sense of belonging, feeling respected, valued for who they are, and that they can contribute their best, is really about getting that mix to work together. So I thought I'd start off how I define diversity. So I've titled this first agenda item in terms of why should you develop a strategy. I thought a better way to say is how do we get the attention of our senior and middle management to recognize that our organization needs to develop a strategy. And this particular approach I'm going to talk about today, and this work I'm going to present to you, I've been working on for quite a few years, and it's based on good practice research and my own experience. I thought, though, I would start with a quick poll as a lead-in to this first section. And here you go. I'm going to, I think, Sarah, because you have control, I can't do the poll. There it is. There it is. So I want to give you a few minutes to think about this one. Is this a myth or reality that diversity initiatives such as diversity councils, things like Heritage Months, those programmable things we do, does that lead to sustainable diversity? I'll give you a few minutes there. And the numbers are still coming in. Well, still it's closed. So interesting, 63% of you said it was a myth and 37% said it was reality. So here's the thing, and again, comes from my practice and from the good research, is that we really, the programmable diversity, the things that I put, serve as almost a scaffolding of our organization or our building. And so it needs to be there, but it's not enough for diversity and inclusion to become sustainable within our organizations. And so we really need to move to approaches, ideas, and strategies that really lead to sustainability. And so we don't want to lose these, but we really need to look at hard wiring into our organization's mission, growth, profitability, operational strategies to embed it and everything that our organization touches. So that leads me to the work of Tapia, which I actually adapted with one of my clients where we were developing a diversity strategy roadmap. And so I'll give you a high-level view, and then I'll walk through the individual pieces. So at the top, it's culture and what do we believe in and why, and that is really the mission, vision of the organization and what's important to the organization. We have values and practices on the side there, and that is those core values and practices that contribute to inclusive diversity. That's a term I often coin. In the middle, and any of you have read Tapia's work, you see diversity powering innovation. Well, in his book, he calls it the business case. And that may apply to your organization in terms of what do you sell and who, what is your product per se. However, with my client, we decided, innovation is so important, and no matter what we do, produce or sell, and so utilizing diversity to drive innovation. So it is external, if you were. Inclusive environment for talent is really about the talent business case, who does our work, and it is everything from recruiting, selection, et cetera, and I'll add a little bit more to each of these as, again, I'm giving you the high-level view. Operational is really how we run our business, and it is internal, and so, is how do we leverage and integrate diversity into what we do day to day. So let me give you some examples, pop back up to each one and say a little bit more. So diversity powering innovation. We know from the research that the more cognitive diversity, the more diverse perspectives we bring to a team, we bring to the table, the more innovation and creativity we'll get over a homogeneous team. There was a report done by Ernst & Young, it's called The New Global Mindset, Driving Innovation Through Diverse Perspectives, said that argues that the traditional view of diversity through the lens of gender and race is too narrow and should include a host of other differences, including cultural background, generation, education, skills, personality, and life experiences. So we know that diverse approaches, perspectives will lead to higher productivity and better cost effectiveness. And for my particular client, as an example, and maybe the same for you in the room, that you may need homegrown solutions that are specific to your organization, and this is a way to do it. In terms of inclusive environment for talent, that's, and you've heard this word in terms of employer of choice, but it's being strategic about it. So being strategic in terms of branding yourself as an employer of choice as it relates to a diverse and inclusive environment. It's about engagement. It's about policies and practices and procedures that support diversity. And also under this bucket is that you are representative of the talent you're trying to reach and the people you serve within your organization. So this is that recruitment, retention, training and development, promotion, and engagement that lead to an inclusive environment. Lastly, the idea of operational imperative, it's really leveraging the people in your organization to get the work done. So it's through their competencies, cultural competencies, it could be their language skills, specifics that they bring to the table because of the diversity that they bring. And it is about achieving company goals and success. So I use this framework when I work with clients to really get clear about where do you need to focus, and the idea that it's only sustainable diversity inclusion that will create this strong dividend, that will give you the results, as opposed to the the part I talked about earlier where it's kind of sporadic. So let me now take you to Agenda 2 item, which is the steps towards developing a strategy. And you see my slide there on that. So if I can get Sarah to go to the next slide and say, okay, so what is it? Well, it's comprehensive, it's well planned, it's long term in terms of a change strategy. It goes beyond compliance, so, and I'll actually share with you a continuum a little later on to see where you are. Um, it is really focused on the organization performance, effectiveness, and really using diversity as a resource for that. It is congruent with your strategy, so it is directly linked to your business strategy and business plan. So it's not random, for sure. And it's about the vision that you want to achieve, and it's about seeing it as an investment in your organization's success and future. So if you look at another plug for why this is important is that we know that people are moving across international and cultural barriers. We know that traditional practices that work for homogeneous populations will no longer work as our workforce becomes more diverse. And we need to look for new practices and policies that will help a diverse pool be successful. So it really serves as your competitive advantage and link to your success and your direction as an organization. So this next slide, what I'm going to do is walk you through it, and then I'll pause and ask you where you think you are on the continuum. So if you look at the number one, I'll do the first two, and then I've got some points that Sarah can put up. But compliers is they're doing it because to meet the law. I call it stay out of jail. And so their strategy, if you were, and they probably don't have a strategy, but it's anything to meet human rights legislation to stay out of jail. Beginners are organizations who want to do the minimum, but their focus is on numbers, or their focus is on just small initiatives that really won't lead to sustainable diversity. Adapters, and Sarah, you could click on this one. So adapters really experiment with a number of diversity programs and initiatives and policies. So they put their foot in the water, and they're starting to have some policies and some initiatives. They're seen as at this point, though, it's still seen as an HR responsibility. So there's not that embracing of the whole organization. But things are happening. Realizers now have made the link to business success. There's an early movement towards, I call it applying a diversity lens to all aspects of the business. And their vision, values, mission statements highlight the importance of diversity. So if we were to read those statements, we would see in there threaded something related to diversity and inclusion. For the realizers, leaders are starting to become champions. You see them stepping out and making the investment. Integrators, now they have, and this is the approach I'm proposing for you today in terms of they have integrated diversity inclusion into the day-to-day and into their business strategies and so forth. They have internal accountability frameworks in place to measure success, and they have things in place for supplier and customer diversity initiatives. They've been established and aligned. And the last, which I didn't put up here, is community leaders. And we could put a handful in this bucket, but their organizations, a leader engaged in community-wide efforts to educate and inform others about the importance of diversity, and they're active proponents and supporters of community diversity-related initiatives. So we'll stop and take another poll in terms of where would you put yourself on this continuum? Are you at the low end, in the middle, or at the high end? So low would be 1 or 2, middle would be 3 or 4, and high would be 5 or 6. We'll give you a minute to do that. So there you go. So it looks like the majority of you, and there's 23 on this call if I look at the numbers, are at the middle. So you're somewhere either adapter or realizer, and there's some of you that are at the high end. Isn't that great? And when we do open up the floor to Q&A, it'd be interesting to hear perspectives and on either end of the scale. Those of you at the low end, I mean, I think it's just, I would say, here's your opportunity to perhaps move yourself along the continuum. Okay, thank you very much. Next slide, Sarah. Here's an interesting one. We'll do it really quickly. Sustainable diversity can be driven from employees up. What would you say to that? We'll wait till it closes. Pretty close. It's actually a myth. There was some great research done by the American company Diversity Inc., 10 years of research that said that they have not seen a single example of sustainable diversity efforts driven from employees up. They have seen companies fall off the Diversity Inc. top 50 list for not having senior management engagement. So this is really important that you have senior management engagement if you were to be successful in sustainable diversity. So here's the point I made earlier in terms of success equals alignment of your organizational strategies to plan change diversity strategy. And why I use the word change, because it is putting something in place that's going to move you along that continuum or keep you and further develop in that continuum. And so my experience is this, the organizations have been successful with this, and I'm going to give you an approach to do that, have done it by really linking it to their business strategy, their corporate strategy. So let me walk you through the steps that we've used with clients. The next slide, that's great, Sarah, thank you. And you can probably put up the rest of this. When I work with clients, I really work a lot with current state, future state, and then the gap in between. So here's what it looks like in developing a diversity strategy. So we always conduct an environmental analysis, and that will often include, it can include an organizational readiness assessment. So we've used various assessments to see where the organization is. We look at all your documents. What are you doing currently? We have worked with organizations to do a version of a SWOT, and then good practice research. So we'll look at what good practices or good organizations are doing in these areas and line you up to it to see where you are. Future state, and that's where you would go next, is where do you aspire to be? So where do you want to be in terms of diversity inclusion? Organizations have varied between 3 to 5 years on this one. Excuse me, but where do you want to be? So fast forward. And then with that, developing some strategic goals, some focused areas and objectives, very much like a strategic plan. Those of you who've done that, and some outcomes and measures. The middle is your action plan and budget. And the last client we worked with, it was actually all raggedy because she had it was a roadmap that captured the goals, objectives, and the action for each, and she walked around with it. And actually they went further to develop a scorecard to measure. So it becomes your working document that, the diversity strategy action plan and budget, and that's what you roll with. Why I say creative tension? Because this is the hard part. It is, and we'll talk about some pitfalls later, but it's just moving it into action is, as you know, a challenge at any point in time in an organization. Next slide. So this, the last organization we work with, so this gives an example of what we did. I'll walk you through it. So this scan, we looked at their internal documents and we did the measurement of good practice research compared to they were. We did interviews. So if you put the next one up, consultation. So in this particular project, we interviewed 20 employees and selected members of HR and the diversity committee. We also did focus groups with a number of groups just to get a good sense of that current state of the organization. From there, we did a report to give them a sense of current state and some of the things we were seeing in terms of, and I use this language, natural strengths and gaps and opportunities for the organization. We had asked key stakeholders most pressing concerns and issues. We gathered that in that consultation and produced it here. And we made recommendations for the future state. However, we stopped at that point and got together with the team, if you were, that were working on this and had a planning meeting. So it was facilitated by one of the Graybridge Malkam team. I've done a session, and to really work with the team that's putting this together to pull together something that was meaning and relevant for their organization. So as opposed to handing them over a strategy, at this point they took the data and translated it into that final strategy that they were working with. Okay, so my last item, and I think I'm doing okay on time, this idea of pitfalls and success factors to avoid. So Sarah, if you can go next. So you're probably not surprised to see this in that if you don't have leadership buy-in, if they're not talking about this, supporting you, then it is going to be really, really hard. My sense is a majority of you in the call, and I don't get to see who's there, are in HR, and you know that when we partner with senior leaders and get their engagement, we'll have far more success in any program we're trying to put forward or any strategy. The next one, if it's, again, it has to be embedded in the organization's strategy, the organization's business case, whatever document that is really kind of grounding the organization overall, and that it's not just an HR thing. The next one, no score called measurement frameworks. The old saying, what gets measured gets done. And so if you can build in metrics from the start as part of your strategy, and it could be things, there's tons of metrics, but some of them that we've used is customer and employee satisfaction, retention data, recruitment metrics, metrics around engaging management commitment, so that we've identified quite a few possible metrics. But if you don't have that in place, that's going to be hard to not only monitor progress, but to convince your senior leaders that this is still a good thing to do. The next one, when you roll out something like this, and I suggest that you manage it, but if you don't have dedicated funds and resources, it's going to be really, really hard. And so and it's not just the rollout, it's the ongoing management of the strategy. You know, strategies, let's imagine you do a 3-year strategy, you're going to have things in year 1, year 2, year 3, and so you need people around and resources to do that. And last but not least, lack of accountability. And we get a lot of requests on help us flesh this out. How could we build in accountability? What would that look like? So being strategic, even to think about what will work in your organization to get people to follow through on implementation. So those are the pitfalls. Let me walk you through what I've identified as success, and then I want to share an example with you. So I suggest less is more in terms of your list of goals and objectives. The power of three is what I can say, but it's really important that you want to pick a few pivotal objectives where accomplishments will lead to a whole bunch of favorable outcomes. So again, you're probably seeing that this first part is a lot of upfront thought and commitment and being very strategic and systematic so that you narrow down on some goals, objectives, sorry, that is going to make a difference. The next one is you need to build a bridge between desire and immediate objectives that lie within the organization gas. So you have to draw pictures for people to say, here's where we want to be, future state, here's where we are, and here's the bridge that's going to get us there. So help people see that in order to engage. And again, it can't be out of reach or you'll just shut them down. The last one is to acknowledge to acknowledge challenges that being faced and approach for overcoming them. So if you can anticipate ahead of time what could be potential obstacles or challenge and build in strategies to overcome them, that will help at the front end in terms of the execution of your strategy. Okay, so an organization, at least in the past, I'm anticipating they're still not doing badly, is IBM, where they came up with, and this was actually in Australia, their Australian organization that came away with some guidelines or lessons that they came up with. So I'll get you to put the first one up. So they said start with good data through quantitative research if possible. And so that's your current state analysis to, for example, what does representation look like in your organization now? What does it look like in who's getting promoted and not? Who's on leadership development programs? What kind of initiatives do you have happening? Things like that, and we have a whole list of them. It says, and also I'd add to this one, it's not on your chart before we get to engage champions, but build the business case using industry metrics to find comparisons on measurements. So retention rates is often a good one that you can say, here's what good practice is doing and here where we are. So you can't say enough about good measurement. And then find champions within the business, both senior management employees, to really lead this initiative. One organization that was quite successful was a senior leader just decided he had enough, and he looked around him and saw the diversity amongst them in his city and realized as he looked inside his organization that they were not doing a great job, and he was the one that led the initiative. So champions are huge, and I encourage people to identify them as part of that current state. Position the programs as an initiative for the whole business and not just HR. So you really need to say, come up with things that are business-wide and comes back to linking back to the business. Look for low-hanging fruit. Sorry, I'm just taking a drink of water here. So, and there's a lot of things you can do that don't need a big budget. So what are they? Often awareness, training, things like that would fall in this bucket to get the ball rolling. The next one, pilot any program before rolling out as small steps and build momentum. So the organizations have taken baby steps and tried something and built almost like prototyping and getting feedback and then iterating on it have been very successful as it has been for IBM. Other ones here is staff focus groups are good ways to get buy-in as it relates to that pilot one. And again, you want to link everything to the organization core values and business. And communicate successes. Have a communication plan that would support your strategy to communicate how successful you've been. Okay. Next slide, Sarah. And I think I'm going to skip it, actually, that one. Can you skip that one and go to the next? No? Okay, well, everybody's answering it. It's okay. Because I think I answered that question, so I'd be giving away the answer but it can't stand on its own. It's got to be led, and it leads to my leaders driving. So how can leaders drive diversity and inclusion? So they defining and cascading the business case, and seeing it as, and this was the language of my client, they saw it as mission critical. So if you can get your leaders to put it in their words, to make sense of it for their business, that will go a long way. The next area is they need to support the strategy. So in terms of execution of the plan and monitoring of the impact. And then the lead by example, so the commitment to the day-to-day. And as HR professionals and leaders, often we put the coaching hat on here to help our leaders do this. But as I mentioned earlier, they're so pivotal in the success of a diversity strategy. So I mentioned this idea of the good practice, and we do quite a comprehensive comparison of what's out there in terms of good practice and how the organization is doing. Here are some of the, I guess, broad areas. I call it the keys to sustainable and diversity inclusion. So values equal strong diversity. So those organizations have respect, inclusion in their value statements, and it's visible and they live it, are more successful. The next one I've already said, so I won't say more about that. The integration of diversity in every aspect of the organization's business operations, so that the direct links are made, and I call it the diversity lens. It's very clear where the lens is applied. The one about putting goals and objectives in performance appraisals and compensation. Now, some of you may be going, yikes on this one. It's a struggle sometimes to get diversity goals and inclusions in any sort of performance plan and comp, but those have been successful, have built accountability that way. The next one, in terms of diversity leadership to achieve results. So an example of this that often is, you have someone that's really strong on that area, and they lead a project with the diversity lens. You see people stepping up to building that lens into the work that's done day to day. Communication I've talked about, and celebrating successes. Number 7 is important, and some of you may have already done this already. You've gone through your internal systems and processes and ensure that they're free of any bias, anything that could discriminate against diverse employees and or customer suppliers. Leveraging supplier diversity to achieve operational excellence is another good practice. So using a diverse supplier base to achieve your goals operationally. Attraction and retention of key talent, and training, ongoing training and guidance to management and staff. So for each of these, I have a comprehensive, more breakdown on what this would look like done well. Next slide. So I'm going to end with this poll. And I'll say a few things. I'll let you answer it, and then I'll say a few things about it. Yes, definitely, definitely. And the story I have to tell is I was working on a project for Mirror where I interviewed people, leaders in mining organizations across Canada. And I always remember this HR leader who said, we never let go of the reins on attraction and recruitment of talent, even in challenging times, because things will shift again and we want to be ready. We want to have a strong talent pool available. So we always are what I call head farming versus headhunting and looking for diverse talent. And so the other thing to think about here, if you drop the ball on diversity inclusion, you're really sending a message to your employees that it doesn't matter, and to your customers who are very diverse, that you don't see this as an important part of doing business. So I'll end there, Sarah, and I'll open it back up. I'll give it back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Judy, for sharing with us all those elements that are vital for a well-formed and thorough diversity strategy. Some of those pitfalls are going to be pretty important, I think, when we're developing strategies. But it's time for our Q&A session. So I invite everybody who's participating to type in your questions for Judy or for myself, and we will do our best to get you some answers. But as usual, I've got my question all queued up here for you, Judy. I want to know, why should we look at diversity in its entirety in our strategic plan, as opposed to just looking at, a plan for women, or, right now we're going to focus on Indigenous people as a strategy. Why should it be more holistic?
Good question. For me, as I look at, I'll look at it, my background is HR, so let me put on that lens first. In terms of the talent that I'm trying to attract are very diverse. So we know that obviously there's underrepresentation of women, and we've got lots of data, so don't drop the ball on that. We know that our labor pool is going to be 100% immigrant or 100% non-white. So if we drop the ball on that, we're going to have trouble finding talent. We know that the workplace is shifting in terms of, for the first time, 4 generations in the workplace, and with particular the millennials and then the up-and-coming generation. And we know that people are retiring at high rates, particularly in senior leadership roles. So we can't afford just to focus on one dimension of diversity. We need to open up the door to I call them dimensions of diversity. I think you would be selling yourself short if you just focused on one area. Now, within your strategy, and when you get to objectives or actions, or objectives and actions, you may have a particular objective that focuses on increasing women and visible minorities in the senior leadership or the leadership cadre. That can be possible.
Yeah, I think that's
from a business perspective, I would say one more thing. From a business perspective, my customers are diverse, and so if I don't get my act around that and get organized for that to better serve them, I will not be competitive. So there's the other reason, Sarah. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that point around the plan being broad, but then the tactics perhaps being focused is one that really makes a lot of sense to me. And while you were answering that question, we've got a bunch more come in. So here's a good one. You mentioned training as one aspect that should be included in your strategy. But in a time of budget constraints, I know in mining right now, we are hopefully 2017, we're going to start coming up out of this downturn, but commodity prices have been pretty depressed. So how critical is training and spending on training in making diversity effective, and should it be mandatory training?
So several questions within there. So let me see if I can unpack it. So how critical is training? It depends on where you are on that continuum. So if there is no awareness anywhere, you have done nothing in terms of creating awareness, then you probably need to put something in place. But is there ways to get creative about it? We know that in terms of learning and development, 70% happens on the job. In terms of going on a course, That's like 10%, if that, and the other 20% comes from things like mentoring, coaching, those kinds of things. So is there ways that you can build in your employees' development an objective that relates to diversity inclusion? And so we don't always have to send people on training courses. And if we are missing that base awareness, then can we provide that to them in a way that they'll get it? I'm going to be totally honest with you. I'm not a big proponent of what my lovely friend calls sheep dip training, where we make it mandatory and everyone needs to go. And at the same time, sometimes as an organization, we need to do that to get across the values and commitments that we really need. So I had one client say, we need to treat diversity inclusion training like safety training. Everybody has to go on it. It's an important part of doing our business. That might be a way to pitch it. So I don't know how, I've said a whole bunch of things there. I don't know, Sarah, if that helps.
Well, if I didn't answer that person's question, they can feel free to jump in with some more follow-up questions.
Right. So I'll just say, let me summarize. So mandatory, it has its advantages and disadvantages, and to think that through and how you're going to counter the disadvantages. Because what happens through my experience, and I've done this over and over, that the keeners come first and the ones that are holding out come at the end, and it's tough. So in the industry, I think we need to, overall, not just in mining, we need to get creative of how do we engage employees and get them committed in the topics that are important to us.
Well, I think that's a great point that leads into the next question, which relates to mentorship programs around how valuable are they in helping people, including women, advance. And we know they're used a lot of kind of hand in hand with training programs, but are they really effective, mentoring programs?
So far, the news is good on mentoring programs, and we've worked at Graybridge with a number of clients in helping them develop a mentoring program for their employees. And it wasn't just for women, it was for just diverse employees. And they've had good success. Similar to my point about baby steps, so they piloted and then built and adjust as they went. The value of mentoring is a couple of things. Number one, not only the mentee benefits, the diverse mentee, but the mentor benefits. So a lot of organizations do it as a way to actually also educate and engage the mentors, the people they've identified to mentor. The other thing is, we know that one-on-one, such as mentoring coaching, has huge value in a person's development, and it's a great developmental tool. So I'm a supporter of coaching and mentoring, and would recommend it if that's something that's possible.
Great. Another good question here. On the slide, we had all those steps we had to go through to create a diversity strategy. How long does that typically take to go through all those steps to really develop a good diversity strategy?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would say, it depends on the organization and how fast they can move, but 4 to 6 months is probably ideal. If I think of let me just get that chart out and try to flag my memory, and a lot of it was people's availability, but it takes a good month to do the, maybe less, so 2 weeks to a month to do the scan. The consultations may take a bit longer depending on getting people and how many we want to talk to and organizing focus groups. So let's say that takes 4 to 6 weeks. We develop the report, so we're probably a month and a half, 2 months in. And then having those sessions and going away and working on it. Sorry, I need to take a drink. And then the strategy, so 4 months to 6 months max, is what I would say. Unless you sit down and do it all at once, but that's probably not feasible, and you want to get stakeholders together and so forth.
Fair enough. 6 months, and would that hold for any size organization, right? From perhaps a mining junior, an exploration company, right up to a major international operation, you still think 6 months, or it's scalable?
Yeah, so if you're having to it's scalable. If you're having to reach beyond Canada and get more people involved, then it may take longer. The biggest part is people's schedules and lining people up for the consultation, and just getting people's time. So, you know, I guess a smaller organization could go faster if the people are readily available. But just my experience with this kind of thing, you know, on 3 to 4 months on the low end and 6 months, give or take, on the top end.
Sure. I have another great question here that feeds into the very start of the process around the environmental scan and collecting the information. How important is voluntary self-declaration process upon hiring?
So let me make sure I understand the question. So people self-IDing when you hire them as to what diverse group they fall into?
Yes.
Yeah. It's often helpful data in terms of seeing your representation. Will the world come to end if you don't have it? No. And I know some organizations, it's been hard to put that in place. But again, remember, good data is good. It's helpful as you try to build your plan. A smaller organization, often the HR leader can look around and just know. And they don't need to do the self-ID to know that they're underrepresented, at least in the more visible diverse groups.
Fair enough. And then I guess the next question kind of fits at the other end of the process when we get to communicating. Have you seen any examples or really of any effective or innovative communication products or initiatives for sharing diversity efforts and successes?
Well, so the standard, some of you may do this in terms of having a website or some sort of publication. We've seen town halls. We've seen workshops and presentations. I've had clients, you know, set up in the lobby, and as people come in, provide information. So, you know, in terms of particular vehicles, the other, we've had one organization that put in place what they called Stories of Impact, which was a process for employees at all levels to share stories where they had, where they were successful in the area of inclusion and diversity, and publish that. So that was a creative way, a storytelling way to share information. So again, when I work with organizations, that would be part of our plan to build a communication strategy and plan that fits for their organization, to take care of that step. You're probably seeing a thread here is one size doesn't fit all. You know, part of it is the organization knows their organization, and it's a partnership to make sure that whatever is done fits and is relevant and meaningful and will have impact. And so that will vary from organization to organization. And those who had 7% at the top end of the continuum, they could probably speak to that.
I've got one last question for you here, Judy, and it mimics one that I was wondering. What tactics work when we're managing up to try to convince senior management that we need to approach diversity strategically as opposed to programmatically? And, you know, some of those leaders might not be there in terms of diversity, let alone inclusion. Any tips or tactics for managing up?
Okay, so here's the first thing. I would want to know the personality type of the person that I'm managing up. So how do they like to receive data? What's going to capture the what's in it for them? So I want to know my leader. I do my homework. And so depending on that, then I would, so if it's a person who's a driver and they want the facts and the bottom line, well, I better give the facts and bottom line and get to the point and show examples, etc. If the person is a hard person and you know, if I'm using social style as an example in amiable, then I'd want to hit it from a feelings level in terms of, you know, the idea of inclusion and what it means, and tell stories. It may be more qualitative. So the first step I'd say is, who is the person you're pitching this to, and what's the best way to pitch it, and then go at it. Because the data's out there in terms of lots of evidence of why this is important. There's lots of good practice in organizations. Some of you are on this call, anybody that was in the medium to high, you know, so you're already doing some good stuff, my imagination says. So there's lots to leverage. Just pitch it at the right level. Be organized and prepared.
Great, thanks so much, Judy. I have a couple announcements for the group, but first I'm going to say thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you sharing your knowledge, expertise on this topic. Now, I want everybody to stay connected on this. So if anybody didn't get their questions answered or has any more thoughts, please enter them for the group. I also want to mention to everybody that next week there's a really great event happening in Toronto on diversity and inclusion. It's actually called the Auction for Action, hosted by Women Who Rock. It's on Tuesday at 5 p.m. at the Trump Hotel. This event, basically, they have lined up some of the top C-suite leaders in mining to come together, and women can bid on them for mentoring time. So Judy mentioned in this call that, you know, mentoring was very effective, and here's a great way to access some senior leaders from the industry. I know the CEO of Vale is going to be there, some really great leaders available offering their mentoring time, and it's for charity. So if anybody's in Toronto, I'm going to be there. So if anybody else is going to be there, come by, find me, say hi. I'd love to meet you know, members of this network in person. And for everybody else that's not based in Toronto, joining us from across the country, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you next month, hopefully, at our webcast, which is going to be with Goldcorp and Oshki. They're going to be sharing with us their successful Indigenous programming that's called AMSTEP, Aboriginal Mining and Skilled Trades Entry Project. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about that. And again, thank you, Judy, for joining us today. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, and have a good day. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye.